I was sent the pre-release preview disc for this one, which is a Blu-ray, a BDR, and because it's not the most impressive Blu-ray I've ever seen, my interest in how the 4K would look was piqued, and hence I ordered the impressive, typical Second Sight Special Edition, and it certainly does not disappoint. Filmed in Canada in 1979 and first released, I think, in March 1980, The Changeling is an impressive, stylish ghost story murder mystery. We tend to group all these sort of films, these ghost stories, haunted house films, in the horror movie genre, but I don't think that quite fits The Changeling. It's a more intelligent sort of film, and with George C. Scott in the lead role, I think this gives it a sort of gravitas and is more grounded, certainly more so than the over-the-top horror movies we get today. It's also a detective story, and at first there is a bit of a red herring which indicates that the ghost is that of a girl. Scott's John Russell character is suffering terrible grief following the accident that kills his wife and daughter, and I think for that reason he probably feels that the haunting, the girl that's haunting him, or that he thinks is haunting him, is that of his own daughter, but that doesn't turn out to be the case. However, that's the hook that gets him in, and he becomes a detective to uncover exactly what is going on. Now, this film has a wonderful atmosphere. It's an atmosphere we don't tend to get in horror movies or ghost stories today. The sort of film grain look of this movie, the wonderful score, the direction by Peter Medak, the acting, everything about it comes together to make it believable. And then there's that reproduction of this mansion, the gothic looking mansion that they actually erected from scratch. It's just a facade with a scaffolding background to give it some depth, but they created it, it looks convincing, and it really does add to the overall atmosphere of this one. But I think it pays to know a bit about the film before you go into it, because this ghost is a bit of a poltergeist, and it seems to grow on the energy from John Russell as he gets more into it. So this ghost does end up with quite a reach, and when you first see the film you may think that, oh, this is getting a bit ridiculous, but stick with it and try and keep sucked into that atmosphere, because it does all come together. And I think it's most famous for the scene with the ball, the bouncing ball that was Russell's daughter's, her favourite toy, and that famous scene, which apparently took a long time to get right, is when that ball comes slowly bouncing down the stairs and Russell looks at it in disbelief. It's time to get rid of that ball, so he drives out, dumps it into a river, comes back, and that same ball is bouncing down the stairs. And looking at it closely on the 4K, I think you can see it slightly wet from where it ended up in the river. So this ghost really has developed power. This poltergeist really has developed power and a reach, and can really force the story along and force John Russell into doing what he wants to do, to reveal that he was killed, how he was killed, and what exactly has happened. And that's where the changeling of the title comes in. So I think that's enough about the story. Now, in order to understand this 4K, I think I've got to tell you what happened here, because I was sent the Blu-ray, as I mentioned. The grain structure on that is really coarse, and I think a lot of how the Blu-ray looks is down to the scanning process, because scanning a film is known to exacerbate film grain. And in this case, the original camera negative for The Changeling was not available, so the next generation down is the interpositive, which we should all know is excellent quality, because you've only got to look at the transfer on 4K of Apocalypse Now. That's absolutely fabulous, and so therefore the interpositive of The Changeling should produce equally fabulous results, dependent on the image quality in the first place. Now, I don't think it was ever as sharp as Apocalypse Now, but it has got a nice filmic look, and that has come across in the 4K, which, even though one of the extras on the Blu-ray is dated as 2022, I do think the actual master of the film on the Blu-ray is an older scan, and there has been a new scan for the 4K, because it is so much sharper and so much better overall. It's just maybe to get the best out of the picture, you've got to dull the image down on your telly or video projector. Now, because of the Blu-ray, I did that in spades with the 4K on my video projector, and it looked even better than it did with the HDR set higher up. And the only place really where the film grain is coarser than we would like is on the opening titles, but that's to be expected, because that's an optical composite where you've got the live action footage and you've got the titles on another element of film. The two are composited together, and there's a third element of film, a new negative, that's used to film them both merged together. So you've effectively got 3 lots of film grain in there. Now that's just about the only point where the film grain, you could say, was harsh. After that, there's 1 or 2 scenes, but things always go wrong on a film shoot. There's always something you don't get perfect, so you'll notice another couple of shots where things aren't slightly in focus the way you'd like, or the film grain is a bit coarse because of low light, or maybe the wrong lens was used, or not the ideal choice of lens. But that's all. But overall, the colour and the density of the 4K, it's one of those situations where you look at the Blu-ray and you look at the 4K, and as other reviewers say, it's night and day, and I think that is the best way of describing this one. It was a revelation to watch the 4K after the Blu-ray, and I would have been happy enough with the Blu-ray once I'd reined in the brightness of my projector. But my word, what an overall release from Second Sight to get the Changeling in this sort of quality, and then you get this marvellous package with so much in it. First of all, you get the sturdy box, and it's possible to open these and leave the shrink wrap on, which is what I always tend to do and have done for over 30 years now with Super 8 films and all sorts of things, Laserdiscs. Then you get the Digipack, which has got the Blu-ray and the 4K, but also the movie's soundtrack on CD, and what a soundtrack, so important to the success and the atmosphere of The Changeling. Just a wonderful bonus to have it. And now all this for just £39.99, and you can get it direct from Second Sight, which is really nice to support these sort of boutique labels. And if you go onto Second Sight's website, you may find some of those special editions that you thought were out of stock and had gone everywhere, but you might be quite surprised. But then in addition, you've got a book. It's not right to call this a booklet because, what is it, 108, 110 pages. And there are some very interesting takes on The Changeling in here from some very good authors, people who know about films and appreciate them. And also a reproduction of the front of house set, 5 of them anyway, and they're really nice to have. So if you were to get a poster of The Changeling to match these, you could put them all in a frame and have them on your wall. So if The Changeling is one of your favourite horror movies, if it's right to call it that, then this really is the set to get. It's coming out on the 5th of June, so if you get your pre-order in any time now before then, should be with you on release date, or maybe even before. Now the sound, again, another release here where I was playing the 5.1 tracks, and I thought, let me try the, well, it's not Dolby Stereo because I think it's a DTS 2.0 that decodes into Dolby ProLogic, but anyway, I tried the Dolby Stereo tracks, and once again I thought they were better than the digital sound, so give them a try on your system, try both out. But it's interesting, the default on this one is actually the 2.0 surround sound, so worth giving that a try. And the image aspect ratio is 185:1. The actual transfer of this was a Severin Films in the USA transfer, so it's their 4K, their Blu-ray, and Second Sight, I presume, have licensed it, but it's a typical Second Sight release. Just look at all the extras on there. And the first one, the interview with director Peter Medak, goes through almost his entire life and his whole career, and I think that lasts about an hour, if not maybe longer. He comes across as a really nice chap, and that was done a few years ago. There's a more up-to-date interview, I think, which is the second one, and there's some interesting things in there. Probably the most interesting for me was an old shot on Oxford Street, which has got a number 7 red double-decker bus. It's a black and white photo, but behind it is HMV store, the original store. And for those of you who haven't heard, HMV are about to reopen it. Yes, they've listened to us fans, and they're going to open their flagship store. So what about that? Going back into Oxford Street to do some shopping again is going to be worthwhile once more. So I'm delighted about that. Can't wait to see what they do with it. Now, I've been watching some other films recently, and one that really has stood out to me is Splice here, A Projected Odyssey, and I think it's absolutely marvellous. There's one thing in there that is particularly pertinent in amongst all the information, all the learning about film there is, and that is Doug Trumbull, who's sadly no longer with us. He died recently, but he was talking about the recent films that have been shot, or videos that have been shot at 60 frames a second or more, and how it escaped everyone what was wrong with them because they don't look quite right. And I've always said to people, or long said to people, I think that the reason film looks more natural is because there's a film going through between the lens and the lamp, and that diffuses the light to give a more natural look. But Doug Trumbull, I think, has nailed it completely. It's not only that, it didn't occur to me, there's no shutter in a video projector. So I think he's cracked it before he died, and hopefully that's going to be a great leap forward in video projection in years to come. But I mention that because if The Changeling had been filmed on video and not had that beautiful film grain structure, it would not have had the same atmosphere. So maybe now, when someone shoots a horror movie or a ghost story on video, if they put a shutter in the camera and then in the projector, we'll get that same beautiful filmic look that is so vital to the creepy atmosphere of films like The Changeling. And when it comes to Splice here, A Projected Odyssey, I can't think of a documentary I've seen on film, the history of film, that would be so relevant and suitable for a great label like Second Sight Films to issue on Blu-ray and or 4K. Now, I've been going through my collection and looking for the oldest Second Sight in that collection, and this is probably my favourite of the lot. It's a DVD, and it's a 1976 series, Children of the Stones, that was first broadcast in 1977. This was filmed at Avebury in Wiltshire, England, at this fabulous stone circle. I'm sure most of us in England know it, and if we haven't been there, we know of it, quite near Stonehenge, for those of you in America that love that. I prefer Avebury, and the advantage of Avebury is you can actually get up and touch the stones, you can get up close to them. A wonderful place and a massive stone circle. Some of the stones have gone, and others were lying down, so they've picked them up, and it's not a complete stone circle anymore, but you can certainly see it from the air. And I shot this last year when I was there. It's a place I've never bored of, and the reason for that, and the reason I got to learn of it, was the series Children of the Stones as a child, which was filmed in the summer of 1976, and those of us that were alive then and old enough will certainly remember that. There's never been another summer like it, but last year did come close for a while. And anyway, I went out there at the end of that summer and got that shot from the air. I think it's a great series, but you've got to have seen it as a child to appreciate it. But there you are, that was Second Sight. I got that about 20 years ago at a shop on Oxford Street, or the end of Oxford Street, just by Tottenham Road at Silver Screen. And as soon as I saw it, whoa, Children of the Stones, went home, watched the lot immediately, brought back all those great childhood memories. And thanks to Second Sight bringing that out, those memories are still with me. And likewise, The Changeling. What a great way to remember that film, almost exactly as it was as a film in 1980. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like, and perhaps consider subscribing so I'll be encouraged to carry on creating content like this. Until the next video, bye bye for now.